The day I had my difficult labor, my husband's first love was also giving birth. I called him dozens of times for help, but he never picked up. Instead, he took his ex to the hospital overnight. His first love and the baby were safe, but my baby and I died. Later, he didn't believe I was dead. He thought it was another one of my tricks to get him back. It wasn't until he saw our bodies that he lost his mind. When I was 9 months pregnant, my husband wasn't living with me anymore. I woke up in the middle of the night with contractions, and my water broke. Scared and panicking since it wasn't my due date yet. I called my husband Tim so many times, but he never picked up. I immediately called an ambulance while trying to dress despite the pain to get to the hospital. But then I slipped and fell hard to the ground and lost consciousness. When I'd regained consciousness, I was already in the car heading to the hospital. My whole body was freezing, feeling like life was slipping away. Someone was holding my hand and said, "Can you drive faster? The mother is hemorrhaging. It's really dangerous." There was a faint male voice from the front. "Okay, I know this car." The ambulance suddenly swerved and braked hard, making everyone scream. Something hit my belly fiercely, and I nearly passed out from the pain. My body grew colder and colder. The driver swore, "Who the hell dares to cut off an ambulance? Are you in a rush to die?" A girl's voice cried out, "Blood, blood. She's bleeding again." A bunch of people scrambled to set up equipment and instruments, but it was too late. My consciousness faded. Shortly after being pushed into the emergency room, I died. My soul floated up, looking at the flat line on my heart monitor and my still bulging belly. Both mother and child were dead. But where was my husband? As if my thoughts had power, my soul drifted to another posh private hospital. I saw my husband sitting anxiously outside a delivery room, staring at the door. He waited a long time, looking at his phone in frustration. He had dozens of missed calls from me, but just swiped them away. He muttered under his breath, "Jane, you have to be okay." Jane was his first love from college. She was married and pregnant around the same time as me. Looks like Jane was the one inside the delivery room. After a long time, a doctor came out holding a baby and said to Tim, "Mother and son are safe. It's a boy.
Come see him, Dad."
Tim awkwardly responded, "I'm not his father. I'm just a friend of the mother. Can I go see her? Souls can't cry." I could only laugh, mocking everything. "Tim, your first love and her baby are safe, but your baby is dead." Tim rushed into the delivery room as soon as he got the okay. Jane was covered in sweat, with her hair sticking to her face. She weakly turned her head away. "Don't look at me, I look awful." Tim looked at her tenderly. "You don't look awful. You went through so much. I didn't expect you to be the only one by my side when I was most scared. When the contraction started, I could only think to call you. Thank you for bringing me to the hospital, otherwise." Jane's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know what would have happened.
I was so scared of dying.
I was really scared." Tim held Jane's hand. "It's all in the past. Rest easy, I'm here." Jane responded softly. Tim loved her soft voice. Jane was his first love in college. They dated briefly before she broke up with him, saying they weren't compatible. Not long after, she started dating a rich guy. Her social media was full of posts showing off gifts from that senior, luxury cars on her birthday, diamond rings on Valentine's Day. But all the guys who liked Jane were still obsessed with her because she was as pure and beautiful as her name suggested. She said she'd always be their little sister, no matter who she was with. Jane graduated and got married, then moved abroad with her husband, making many girls envious. My husband met me while starting his business back home. We dated and got married, and I got pregnant a year later. Tim often touched my belly and said, "If it's a girl, let's name her Jane." I didn't think much about it. It sounded nice until we went to a reunion together, and an expectant mother showed up, catching everyone's attention, including my husband. Ever since she appeared, Tim's eyes never left her. She smiled at him and said, "Tim, long time no see." In that moment, Tim stuttered nervously. "Jane, you're here." "No, you're back." They called her Jane. I touched my belly, feeling a chill in my heart when we got home. I asked him why he couldn't take his eyes off Jane. He confessed and told me their story. I finally understood who the girl in the white dress in his Instagram profile picture was. Tim swore, "We're really nothing. I was just surprised she's back. Don't overthink it." I didn't want to deal with him anymore because I knew he was lying.
His ears were red.
Tim's ears always turned red when he lied. Later, I found out Jane's marriage was awful. Her husband often beat her and cheated with others. When she was 5 months pregnant, he beat her so bad almost miscarried. She couldn't take it anymore and came back home. When Tim heard this, he was furious. How could anyone not cherish his goddess? That night he posted a picture on Twitter. It was of the moon obscured by clouds. His distant, unattainable first love.
Jane gave it a like.
Since Jane came back, Tim became increasingly absent-minded. He often claimed to be working late and didn't come home. Or he'd say he had reunions. But who has reunions 3 times a week? Our conversations became less. He no longer gently touched my belly, but instead stared at his phone, laughing to himself every day. One day, he came back reeking of perfume, and I finally couldn't take it anymore. I said to him, "Tim, let's get a divorce." He frowned and asked me why I was being unreasonable again. "What do you think? Do you want me to spell it out?" He was silent for a moment, then finally said with a cold face, "I won't divorce. I'm really messed up right now.
I'll move out for a while.
Besides, you're pregnant. We can't get a divorce." So Tim moved out. He made his Twitter private. I couldn't see what he was posting anymore the next time I saw him. I was already dead. It happened when Tim got a call from an unknown number. His expression shifted from serious to shocked. He stammered, "Dead, they all died." "Are you joking?" Turns out, the hospital found Tim's contact in my records and called to inform him of my death. Tim's phone slipped from his hand. His face went pale. "No way, no way. She can't be dead." Before he finished speaking, he seemed to remember the dozens of calls I had made to him. His hands shook as he redialed my number. As expected, no one answered. Jane nervously asked him, "What's wrong?" Tim didn't even look at her. He staggered out the door. Tim arrived quickly at the hospital, where the hospital had also contacted my parents when my mom got the news of my death over the phone. She seemed to faint. I felt a pang of bitterness. I had married Tim despite my parents' strong objections. They had no reason other than believing that Tim was a very selfish person who only thought of himself. They said marrying him wouldn't make me happy, but I didn't listen. I said I would make my own choices in life and married Tim against their wishes. They were so angry, they cut ties with me. I had hoped to reconcile by showing them their grandchild after it was born, but that day would never come. Tim burst into the hospital. The doctor asked him to sign the death certificate. At that moment, Tim's parents arrived to his mom with tear-streaked cheeks. Wasn't it before her due date? How could she die? Yeah. Was it a mistake during surgery?
She was always healthy.
Finally, a nurse who had accompanied me couldn't stand it anymore. She slapped the notification down on the table and yelled at Tim. "Are you the husband? You want to blame us? Your wife was about to give birth. Where were you? Why weren't you with her? What kind of husband are you?" She wasn't positioned right, and when she was brought in, she had been sideswiped by a car and had suffered a collision. She died in childbirth. Don't blame others for your own negligence. Tim was stunned. He mumbled, I suddenly. A slap landed on Tim's face, causing him to stagger and fall to the ground. Tim's father shouted, "You scoundrel! Where were you while your wife was giving birth?" Fooling around, dazed and with stars before his eyes, Tim covered his face and said, I was working. I didn't see." His father stepped forward, ready to hit him again. "What work is more important than your wife and child?" Tim's mother was still crying. Just then, Tim's phone on the floor lit up. It must have fallen out when he got hit. The incoming call showed up. Tim's mother quickly answered it, accidentally hitting the speakerphone button. Jane's voice came through. "Tim, the baby just had trouble breathing and was taken to the emergency room. I'm so scared. Can you come and be with me? The baby's just been born." Tim's mother was stunned. Realizing what just happened, she screamed, "Who are you, you shameless woman? Don't you have a husband? Why are you asking my son to accompany you?" Tim hurried to snatch the phone, but his mom smashed it against his face. Are you trying to kill me from rage? Are you having an affair? I'm asking you, were you at work or with another woman tonight? Tim dropped to his knees with a thud. Tina and I have been living separately. Her due date wasn't here yet. I didn't know she was going into labor. The person on the phone was an old classmate whose husband is out of the country. She was also about to give birth and asked me to take her to the hospital. But it's nothing inappropriate. The room fell silent. Tim's father was confused. Is it me? Or are you the one with the problem? Disbelief etched on his mother's face. She seemed shocked that she had raised such a fool. She pointed at Tim, words failing her. After a few sobs, she collapsed. Tim's mother had a heart condition and was having an attack. Nurses quickly took her to the emergency room, while Tim's father continued to kick him until onlookers intervened. Tim's father sobbed loudly. It's my fault. How did I raise such an idiot? He then turned to my body, crying out, Tina, it's our family that wronged you. Watching this scene made me somewhat sad. In truth, his parents were wonderful people and had always treated me well. They'd long anticipated the birth of their grandchild, but suddenly I felt my floating spirit gain some substance. I looked at my hands, seemingly regaining some sense of touch. What's happening? A voice suddenly echoed in the air. That's because you've bound to the damage conversion system. I was surprised. What system? Hello, host. Congratulations on binding to the damage conversion system. For every bit of damage inflicted on those who caused your death, you will regain a bit of your life force. If those who harmed you die, you will be given a chance to be revived. I was overjoyed. Are you saying I have a chance to live? Yes, host. But whether you can achieve your goal is also closely related to some karmic factors from your previous life. Tim's mother was soon saved. After she regained consciousness, she kept crying. Tim wanted to see her multiple times, but she wouldn't let him in. When Tim's parents finally agreed to see him, my family had also arrived. Back then, I didn't listen to my parents and married Tim far away, breaking their hearts. This time, I finally reaped the consequences. They didn't hide anything and told me everything they knew in detail, even kneeling and apologizing to my parents. My mom was crying her heart out, and my dad was furious and wanted to beat him up. But Tim was nowhere to be seen. He was off visiting his first love. She was having a baby alone and needed care the most. I'm not defending my son. He is a beast I gave birth to. We are sorry for what we've done to you, but rest assured, I have discussed with my husband, and from now on, Tim won't get a penny of our family fortune. We're willing to sell the house to compensate you. Over the years, we've saved some money. We will cover Tina's funeral expenses and your future retirement costs. My mom, in tears, screamed, Who wants your compensation? I want my daughter back, Tim's father said. I know no amount of money can bring her back, but we don't know what else we can do to make it up to you. Whatever you ask, we'll agree. My funeral was held amidst a sea of tears. His parents spent a lot of money organizing my funeral. Tim wanted to attend, but was stopped at the door by people they hired. From now on, don't call me Mom. We are severing all ties with you. Your dad and I have made our wills. Apart from compensating Tina's family, everything else will go to your sister. Tim couldn't believe it. So you guys cut off my card. Tina's gone. I feel terrible too, but I'm your son. His parents were actually very wealthy, which I found out only after I married in. Tim was still using their cards. Tim's father coldly said, I don't have a son like you. Don't call me dad anymore. I don't want to be scolded by the ancestors when I go to the afterlife. At this point, my side of the family saw Tim and rushed to beat him up. His parents just coldly stepped aside and let Tim get beaten. Tim's mother walked into the morning hall and sighed in front of my photo. Good child, you saved my life back then, but my son caused your death. Don't worry, I will never forgive him at this moment. I could clearly feel my body becoming more sensitive. I looked at the injured Tim and his parents and instantly understood what the system meant by karmic factors. I had once saved Tim's mother's life. Shortly after I married in, Tim's mother suddenly had heart issues. I was still in a meeting at my company when I got a call from her. I answered it, but before she could say anything, she hung up. Anyone else might have thought it was a mistake, but I felt something was wrong and rushed to her house, getting her to the hospital just in time. Turns out Tim's mother couldn't speak and had to use an emergency contact button, and I was the only one who noticed something was off and came to help. The doctor said if I had been a few minutes later, it would have been too late. I was so grateful I made it. During that time, I took care of Tim's mother day and night, and she was very grateful. She held my hand and said I had saved her life, and she would treat me like a daughter. I should let her know, and she'd never take his side. She kept that promise. Jane was discharged from the hospital. Tim came to pick her up. He hadn't been sleeping well these days, with dark circles under his eyes and unshaven. Jane had somewhat understood what had happened. She hugged Tim tearfully. "I'm sorry, it's all because of me. If I hadn't contacted you, Tina wouldn't have died." Tim was moved and said, "It's not your fault. Tina and I had problems, it can't be blamed on you." But Jane bit her lip, hesitating. "I heard your parents are breaking ties with you and cut off your card. Are you sure everything's okay?" Tim avoided her gaze. "It's okay. I'm still there, son. They'll cool off eventually." In the car, Tim played with Jane's baby. The baby curiously grabbed Tim's finger and smiled innocently. Tim's face darkened, and he whispered, "If my baby had lived, it would be this cute too." Jane placed her hand over Tim's.
Tim, it's in the past. Don't think about it.
"I'll be here with you." Tim nodded emotionally, and they drove back to Jane's place. I followed them, watching Tim buy lots of baby supplies for Jane and helping carry them upstairs. My heart ached. When I was pregnant, I bought everything myself. Tim never offered to help, saying those were things women should handle, so he could be caring after all. Jane quickly said,
Tim, you don't need to buy so much.
"How can the baby use all this?" Tim tenderly said, "It's fine. These are consumables. You're alone with the baby now. I have to help more." Jane, eyes brimming with tears, threw herself into Tim's arms. "Tim, thank you.
Only you treat me this well."
Tim gently stroked her hair. Just as he was about to kiss her, Jane subtly avoided it. "Tim, the baby still needs a crib." Tim quickly responded, "That's easy. I'll get the one from home."
Tina already bought it.
He froze after saying that, then murmured, "Not like it will be used." I was fuming. He could spend his own money, taking the crib I bought for our baby to please her. Though it's true, it won't be used. Tim went to get the crib for Jane. Jane walked him to the door. Tim suddenly turned back. "Jane, do you still plan to divorce?" Jane nodded slightly, then added, "But I'm still breastfeeding. Can't divorce right now." Tim said, "I mean, if possible, now that I'm alone with no wife or child. And John doesn't care about you. Maybe the two of us." Jane interrupted Tim. "Tim, I get it. It's just that now isn't the right time." Tim quickly responded, I know, it's too soon. But I just wanted to tell you, Jane, that in all these years, you've always had a place in my heart." Tearfully, Jane said, "I understand." Jane saw Tim out of her house, her pitiful expression vanishing the moment she turned around. She rolled her eyes instinctively and sat on the bed, opening up Instagram while her child cried beside her, which she ignored. She messaged someone named John on Instagram. "I just got discharged today. I need to buy a lot of stuff, and you can't be here to help. At least send some money, okay?" The person didn't reply immediately, but soon, she heard a notification of a money transfer on her phone. Jane smiled contentedly. I laughed too. It was funny how Tim was just a backup, easily manipulated by Jane with the slightest effort. He couldn't even stay at her place. Yet he ruined me and my baby's life. But soon, Tim would stop laughing. A video of Tim kneeling in the hospital, pleading with his parents, was posted online. The video was titled "Wife Dies During Childbirth." Husband leaves her to take first love to the hospital. Wife and baby die. Husband kneels and cries. The video quickly went viral, hitting the top of the trending charts locally and beyond. Such shocking news led to a torrent of online abuse. And it didn't take long for people to find out Tim's identity. They called him out, found the scumbag, Tim, a manager at a corporation. How can anyone hire such a jerk? What kind of person cries in a hospital like that? Does anyone know who the mistress is? If you still love your first love so much, why get married? Isn't it disgusting?
Think about it.
This guy takes such care of his first love. The kid must be his, right? Tim was blindsided by the sudden backlash. His phone had been leaked somehow and was now blowing up with calls and messages. His company promptly issued a termination statement. Tim, unwilling to accept this, stormed into the office and argued with HR, saying they had no reason to fire him. The HR lady looked at him disdainfully and said, "Your personal actions have seriously tarnished our company's image, causing a negative impact. Mr. Tim, people are always being watched by the heavens. Take care of yourself." Tim was speechless. Even the superiors who once favored him could hardly look at him without contempt. Tim hid in the break room and cried, feeling like he was on the verge of a promotion just moments ago. Meanwhile, my life force seemed to be slowly coming back. The more Tim suffered, the more damage he took, the better it was for me. Tim drove to Jane's house. As soon as she opened the door, he fell into her arms. But Jane's attitude was different this time. She glanced nervously outside and whined, "At such a critical moment. How dare you come here?
What if they find out about me?"
Tim was stunned. "What are you saying?" Jane's face turned pale, realizing she had misspoken. She quickly invited Tim inside. Tim hugged Jane and said, "Get a divorce. Let's leave this place together. I'll treat your child like my own." Jane pushed him away, lowering her head and putting on a pitiful look. "Tim, I have something to tell you. I think we should stop seeing each other." Tim's eyes widened.
"Why? You know I'm alone with my child now."
"If those people online find out about me, I don't mind. But what about my child?" "Tim, consider my situation. Besides, I'm not divorced yet. If John finds out, I'm done." Tim suddenly stood up, pointing at Jane's nose, yelling, "You change face quickly. Wasn't it you who said you were getting a divorce with John and still loved me?" "So I agreed to take care of you," Jane said. "I didn't expect things to get this out of hand." "Then what were you thinking? What was your plan from the beginning? You're throwing me away now that you're done with me, right?" Realizing the game was up, Jane didn't bother to act anymore. Her usual pitiful tone vanished instantly. "What else? Why do you think I approached you? I did consider being with you. Because your family is rich. But look at you now. Your parents left you nothing in the will. Your house is going to your wife's family, and you're unemployed. Why would I be with you?" Tim froze, never imagining Jane would speak to him like this. "When did you get so pragmatic?" "I always thought you were different from other women," Jane impatiently replied. "Different. Only men believe in the myth of pure-hearted women. Wake up. You should have known when we broke up in college. It's pathetic. Why would I divorce and be with you when you're broke? And a man who ignores his wife in labor?
Who would want someone like that?"
Tim looked like he had been struck by lightning. In a fit of rage, he punched Jane in the face. Falling to the floor, Jane screamed, "Help. Tim, if you come near me again, the security won't let you off." Tim stared at her, frowning. "We won't see each other again. I'm scum, I know, but you're just as disgusting." With that, Tim left Jane's house. Tim was in a miserable state, but I was delighted because my life force kept growing. On his way, Tim received a call. The caller asked, "How does it feel to have that video go viral?" Tim frowned. "You're the one who posted the video."
"Yes."
Tim cursed. "What the hell do you want? Which media outlet are you from? What do you gain from this?" After a moment of silence, the caller said, "I'm a classmate of Tina's. I gain nothing from this. I just want justice for Tina. That day in the hospital, my family was there. Later, I found out the person who died was my old classmate Tina. Back in school, I was poor. Everyone looked down on me, except Tina. She was kind to me. I can't let her die in vain. This is the only thing I can do for her. You'll pay for your actions too." The call ended, and Tim stayed silent for a long time. Right after the call ended, a reminder popped up on his phone. April 17th. Due date. That's the day I was supposed to give birth. Tim had it saved in his notes. He stared at the memo and couldn't hold it anymore. He punched the steering wheel hard, then buried his head and sobbed. Why did things end up this way? Seriously?
Why?
I watched Tim in agony, saying nothing. This was just the beginning. This superficial pain is nothing compared to what I've been through. The video was still brewing, getting more attention, as bloggers joined the discussion. Tim had been exposed so thoroughly, he didn't dare to step out. Tim's parents sold the house and gave all the money to my parents as compensation. The house was bought outright by them in the first place, so they had the right to do so. Tim, with bloodshot eyes, went to his parents' house. I have nothing left. You sold the house. Where am I supposed to go? I'm your flesh and blood, Tim's father said coldly. Go to your mistress. She must have a place for you. Besides, being our child doesn't mean anything. You didn't cherish Tina, and she's carrying your child. Tim's mother was heartbroken. You've done something so unforgivable that we can't recognize you as our son. Tim raged, banging on the door. What did I do wrong? Just because I didn't answer the phone.
I don't deserve to die.
Why are all of you pushing me like this?
Why?
But no one answered, and no one opened the door. Tim, you're right.
You don't deserve to die.
But what did I do wrong to deserve marrying someone like you and losing both my child and my life? Tim left, utterly shattered. He contacted a friend in car sales, hoping to sell his car and start over in another city. But on the day of the transaction, he met an obstacle. A well-dressed man surrounded him at the alley, accompanied by a dozen strong henchmen. Tim sensed trouble.
Who are you?
The man didn't answer. He walked towards Tim, smiling. Do you like the green hat on my head?
What?
Tim started to reply, but was knocked down by a sudden punch. I'm John, the man said through gritted teeth. He played a recording. Jane, are you thinking about divorce? I can't now. I'm still nursing, but if it's possible, now my wife and child are gone, and your husband doesn't care. Maybe we could. Tim, I get what you're saying. It's just the timing isn't right. I know I am. Just saying there's always been a place for you in my heart, Jane. Tim's face went pale. John chuckled. Ignoring your own family to mess with mine, and hitting on my wife on top of that. You think I'm an idiot? Tim trembled. No, it's not what you think. You believe what Jane says. I know what kind of person she is. Your mess has me flying back from abroad to clean it up. How do you plan to fix this?
Terrified, Tim said.
Nothing happened between Jane and me. You're misunderstanding. Do you think I believe you? John sneered, signaling his men go beat him. If he dies, it's on me. The henchman pounced, and Tim's agonized screams echoed through the alley. I couldn't bear listening anymore. Tim was eventually found unconscious by passers-by and taken to the hospital. Despite being covered in blood, his injuries were mostly superficial, except for one thing. His manhood had been irreparably damaged. Someone had viciously targeted it. The doctor regretfully informed Tim he'd never have children again. Tim stared blankly at the ceiling, his face devoid of life. Jane didn't fare much better. Her husband firmly believed she had betrayed him. He beat Jane savagely, ruining her once beautiful face. He also shared screenshots of her flirtatious texts with various men, flooding all her social media groups, including Tim's school groups. Turns out Jane had been manipulating multiple men. Tim was just her current favorite. She had called each man Tim and received financial aid from all of them. The story of her being a victim of domestic violence was a lie. She had been trying to seduce wealthy men abroad, got caught, and returned to avoid divorce. But this time, her husband did abuse her. After a bitter fight, Jane finally divorced, but got no financial settlement and lost her child. Who knows if this kid is mine or someone else's? Her reputation was ruined, and she was utterly broken. Tim's wounds began healing, but his manhood was beyond repair. Someone at the hospital recognized him, and news of his injury spread, becoming the final chapter of the video scandal. Served him right, tried to save someone else's kid, but lost his own and can't have more. Our house was sold quickly. Tim's parents, still feeling some pity for him, left him some money to start anew. Before it was sold, Tim managed to take some of our stuff. To my surprise, he took our photo album and some baby items I had prepared. Since he couldn't go out, he often turned to drinking. He bought lots of alcohol, crying over my photos as he drank. He'd often stroke my pictures, sobbing, "If only you were still here. I've been punished enough. Please come back." See, when I treated him well, he discarded me like trash. Now, abandoned by the world, he suddenly loved me again. Too bad, though. I have no more pity left for him. My health points were getting stronger and stronger. The system told me I was just one step away. He could keep living in a fog, but if he got hurt again, you'd have the energy to come back to life. I can give you a chance to enter his dream. Do you want to hurt him in exchange for a chance to come back to life? I looked at Tim. He was really already in a bad state. Of course I do. I made a deal with the system. I exchanged all my current health points for one chance to enter a dream. Whether I'd come back to life depended on this. The system said, "Are you that determined?" I nodded. I've got nothing to lose if I fail, and if I win,
I can come back to life. Why not?
As soon as the words left my mouth, white light started shining all over me. My life was quickly slipping away. How do you plan to enter the dream? Make him go through everything I went through that night. Tim was awakened by sharp abdominal pain. He was shocked to see his body had turned into a 9-month pregnant woman, and his face had turned into mine.
What?
How could this happen? Why do I look like Tina? The continuous pain was unbearable. He quickly pulled out his phone and called Tim. The call was quickly declined. As he was about to get up and call for an ambulance, Tim sent him a photo. It was a close-up of Tim and Jane. He was so shocked that he stumbled and fell heavily to the ground due to loss of balance. Amniotic fluid, mixed with blood, spread all over the floor. In the empty room, no one could hear his cries of pain. He called for an ambulance, gave the address through gritted teeth, and kept calling Tim, just like I did. He seemed to want to change the outcome of the story, but it was useless. He soon lost consciousness. When he woke up again, he was in an ambulance. When Tim woke up, a nurse was holding his hand. "Driver, can you go faster? The patient's having severe bleeding. It's dangerous." He vaguely heard a man's voice from the front. "All right, I got it." The ambulance suddenly skidded and braked hard, causing everyone to scream. Something hit his abdomen violently, making him nearly faint from pain. The driver cursed. Who the hell dares to cut off an ambulance? Got a death wish. Someone shouted blood.
She's bleeding again.
A group of people scrambled to attach equipment to Tim, but it was too late. Tim couldn't speak from the pain, but his will to survive made him try to listen to every word around him. And then he heard, "Take a picture of that car that cut us off." A black Mercedes E89 T7. Tim's eyes widened instantly. He knew that car. It was his car. The truth was, back then, he'd cut off the ambulance in a rush to get Jane to the hospital, causing the secondary crash that killed me after emergency efforts failed. I died because of him. He was the one to blame. The dream ended. Tim sat on the bed in silence, holding photos of us from happier times, pictures from when we were dating, our wedding photos, the photos of him overjoyed when he learned I was pregnant. "I'm sorry, it's all my fault. I ruined everything." He stumbled around. The recent shocks had broken his mind. He drank a bottle of alcohol and suddenly opened the long closed curtains. He hadn't seen sunlight for days. The sunlight was blinding and piercing. He covered his eyes as tears streamed down.
"I'm sorry. I'm so sorry."
After countless apologies, he finally opened the window and jumped out. The sound of gasping pedestrians came from below as his body splattered into a blood-red flower on the ground. This was the ending Tim chose for himself. Before I could process it all, the system's voice rang out. "Congratulations, host. You've successfully completed the harm conversion, earning a chance to come back to life, preparing for revival." Countless white lights converged into my body, making me feel dizzy. Countdown 3, 2, 1, clear up front. Doctors, get ready. The patient is critical. Scissors, curved hemostat. Pass them to me. Keep monitoring heart rate. It's no good. The baby is already gone. Focus on saving the mother. When I woke up, I was lying in a hospital bed.
My mom was right beside me.
When she saw I was awake, she cried. "You finally woke up. You scared Mom to death." Soon, everyone knew I was awake. My dad and brother rushed over, along with Tim's parents, and even Tim himself. Tim held my hand with excitement. "Tina, it's wonderful you woke up." That's when I realized the system had rewound time to the day I was rescued, but this time I survived. Although the baby didn't make it, I slowly withdrew my hand from Tim's grasp. Tim's expression changed. "Tina," I forced a painful smile that night. "Where were you?" My sudden question confused everyone. My mom asked, "Tina, what are you talking about?" Tim quickly responded, "I'm sorry, Tina. I was working late and missed your call. But I came as soon as I saw it." I asked my mom to bring me my phone. When I checked it, to my shock, there was only one call record to Tim. What's going on? Did I remember it wrong? Was it all just a dream? Tim looked at me gently. "It's all my fault, Tina. I know losing the baby is a huge blow, but we can have more children in the future. For now, you need to take care of yourself, okay?" Tim's mom added. I already scolded Tim. I told him if he ignores you for work again, I'll disown him. Everyone was enjoying the moment. I didn't say much more. Tim was really attentive, refusing to leave my side. Even when I asked him to go pay the bills, he wouldn't leave. He bought me whatever I wanted. He took a vacation from work to stay with me, saying his wife was most important, and he wanted to cherish everything he had. Other women in the ward envied me, envied my obedient and wealthy husband. I just smiled faintly, said nothing. This behavior was strange. If nothing happened, and Tim just missed my calls because of work, he wouldn't be so nice. Our relationship had already fallen apart before. At least Jane's existence wasn't a lie, right? Soon, I made an excuse to get rid of Tim, and after some searching, I found the nurse who was on the ambulance that night. The nurse was surprised to see me.
It's you.
"It's incredible that you made it." She glanced at my flattened belly and comforted me. "You have no idea how critical it was that day. Keeping you alive was already a miracle." I hurriedly asked, "Was the ambulance blocked by another car on the way to the hospital that day?" The nurse replied, "Yes, we were scared to death at the time." My suspicion was confirmed. I smiled faintly and asked, "Do you remember the license plate number?" "The license plate number I don't remember, but let me think." I seem to recall the driver muttering something about a Mercedes E. So that's it. Nothing has changed after all. I didn't get it wrong. So why did my call logs turn into just one? Why did taking Jane to the hospital turn into me working overtime? Because those records were deleted by Tim. Tim also came back with his memories. Tim played the role of a perfect husband next to me every day, and I played the role of a good wife. We never mentioned Jane's name again, and Tim still handed over his phone to me every day. Indeed, there was number information about Jane left on his phone because he understood her true nature. He voluntarily cut ties with her and acted dumb in front of me. Soon after, I got discharged from the hospital on the day I was discharged. I suggested we have a family dinner with everyone. The child was gone, but life had to go on, right? Tim looked at me approvingly and said, "You're right." I smiled back at him. Tim booked the best hotel in the city, ordered the most expensive dishes, and invited all our family and friends, he said. After this incident, I realized just how much I love my wife from now on. I'll always be by her side and grow old with her. I stood up, still smiling, and said I had a gift for all the guests. Then I asked the hotel staff to turn on the giant projector. This hotel was great. Even the projection was so clear. I played a video for them, which I had specifically copied from the dash cam on the ambulance. The video showed how an ambulance was blocked by a Mercedes, and how a bleeding pregnant woman was carried from the ambulance to the hospital. Everyone was stunned, especially Tim. I could see the cold sweat streaming down his face. Yes, his worst fear had come true. "Tim, I'll ask you one more time. That night, when I was in labor and called you dozens of times without an answer, were you working overtime or taking your first love, Jane, who was also in labor, to the hospital, even blocking my ambulance, causing my child to die in the womb?" Tim's legs went weak. Almost unable to stand, he looked at me with pleading eyes, as if begging me not to embarrass him. "Answer me." Tim's father stood up angrily and shouted, "What happened? Wasn't that Mercedes part of the dowry Tina gave you? Where were you that night?" My mom urgently pulled my sleeve and said, "What are you doing?" I said, I want those responsible for the loss of my child to pay. Tim looked at me with unfocused eyes. This was what he feared the most, that feeling of losing everything had come back. He suddenly knelt on the ground and confessed, "That night I was with Jane." Under my pressure, Tim revealed everything. That night, Jane suddenly went into labor. He took her to the hospital and inadvertently blocked my ambulance. He also confessed to deleting the call logs from my phone, but he didn't mention his experiences in the other world. He only said he lied because he was afraid of losing me. He had finally got a chance to change everything and didn't want to lose it again. The dinner party I had arranged turned into complete chaos. Some watched the spectacle unfold as Tim's parents cursed him, and my mom advised me, "Tina, you vented your anger. Let's just leave it at that." Why should I let it go? You're standing here fine. Tim has admitted his mistakes, and his parents are good people. Isn't it better to forgive where possible? Which guy doesn't make mistakes? I laughed with anger. Mom, what if I had died? What if because of Tim, both I and the baby had died? Would you still ask me to forgive him? You're not dead, are you? I shook my head firmly and said I won't forgive him. Not a single punishment should be missed. My child's life was a life. And it's not something Tim's casual apology can make up for. Afterwards, Tim came to me privately, begging me not to divorce him. He said he was willing to atone for his mistakes, even if it took a lifetime. I said, "Tim, you came back with your memories, right? Was your world destroyed after I died and you got scared?" Tim looked at me incredulously. How did you know I didn't tell him? How could I explain that I watched him as a spirit after being killed? Plus, I knew he didn't truly love me. He clung to me as a saving straw after being abandoned by the world. He wanted to return to a life that was respected and wealthy. Besides, if he loved me, how could he so eagerly sever ties with Jane, fabricating lies just to get close to me again? His only real love was himself. Tim's eyes reddened. Can't you give me one more chance? We can have another child. I promised I would make things right. Even my parents said they would give you all their assets. Do you have to be so ruthless? I looked at Tim, his face unshaven, looking just like when the world abandoned him. I nodded. Yes, I have to. Tim refused to agree to the divorce. He said as long as he didn't agree. I couldn't get my way. His parents no longer intervened, though they despised their son's actions. The fact that I survived made Tim's mistake seem less hateful. Do you really need to push it to the point of a divorce? Can't you give him a chance? Many people asked me this, but how could they understand my personal experience? If the system hadn't existed, even I wouldn't be standing here. Besides, who gave my child a second chance? Unless you've suffered, don't advise others to be kind. I brought in a specialized lawyer to talk to Tim about the divorce case, and things escalated from there. The local media, always eager for a story, reported on it. Tim's actions that night spread like wildfire. Everyone in this small town knew about it. This time, the public backlash was lighter than before. Although, Tim was still fired from his job. Eventually, I won the divorce case. Our assets were split half. And I got a significant amount of compensation from Tim. Tim's mother later came to me and said, no matter what happens between Tim and me, she would always consider me her daughter. Wrong is wrong. She wouldn't cover for Tim. I nodded and held the old lady's hand. I've always been grateful to her. Later on, Tim desperately came to me. He said he had lost his job, was unemployed, and his parents had disowned him. He couldn't pay the compensation. I smiled and told him another piece of news. Do you know John is coming back to the country? When Tim heard John's name, his expression changed drastically. The man who had ruined Tim's life. That was his real nightmare, I said softly. John somehow found out about all this. And now he's demanding a divorce from Jane. I heard he even plans to come after you, so take care. Tim left the city the next day, but not before the compensation money was transferred to my account. From then on, we had no more ties. Tim and I were done. Wrong is wrong. There is no remedy for regret in this world. Not forgiving was the best conclusion for us.